What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Drive for Show, DFS for Dough here on RotoGrinders. Another Tuesday night talking golf. And we've got a big week next week with the U.S. Open coming up, not too far behind, but we've got to talk about the RBC Canadian Open here first. Maybe a quick recap of last week's Memorial Tournament. And to help do that, you've got your usual host here, Justin Van Zuiden, STL Cardinals 84. And we've brought back from the content dead, we've brought the boss man out of retirement, Dan Bach, filling in for Noto, who's on baby patrol now. So we hope Noto enjoys some time away and is doing well with a new little one. But Dan, it's been a long time since we've been on this particular show together. So how you been?
I'm doing good. I mean, we're not talking best ball. I wore my Travis Hunter jersey because I'm so excited about like the Jags and, you know, us having like the most electric player in the league on our team. But no, I know it's golf season, and it's really the one thing that I'm able to grind on a weekly basis because I'm, you know, just a corporate honk these days. So I'm happy to pinch hit whenever I can for our good friend Noto, who we wish the very best with him and his new little daughter. So yeah, excited, and what a week to jump in here too, Justin. You know, we get a tournament north of the border on a course that nobody's ever seen. Who knows? What a week for us to jump in here.
Yeah, I told you earlier you picked a poor week to fill in. You could have at least tried to come in with a week that's, maybe got a little bit more excitement for you to talk about, but I suppose it presents a nice little challenge. And the edges in DFS are probably bigger on a week like this, where there's a lot more names that, people may not be familiar with. And maybe the circumstances surrounding the course are a little bit unknown too. So it will be interesting to see how this week plays out. Probably the weakest field we've had in a while. Not a lot of the big names teeing it up the week before a major, but just a quick look back at last week. I know Dan had messaged a few days ago that he had a solid week. So another win from Scotty Scheffler, comfortably ahead of Ben Griffin by the end of the day on Sunday. It was Scheffler's third win in the month of May before the calendar flipped, which was, ironically enough, the same amount of wins that the Colorado Rockies had last month, and they play every day. So pretty good month for Mr. Scheffler. Pretty good month for Griffin as well, though he finished runner-up. Nothing really to be ashamed of. And the course did play pretty tough. Just 11 golfers under par last week, but you also had Sepp Straka, Nick Taylor, Russell Henley, Mav McNeely inside the top five there. Who was on your winner last week there, DB?
Yeah, it was. I finished second in the $100 single entry, so it was about a 5K hit, which is nice. It was interesting, though, because Ben Griffin actually ended up with the same or maybe even more fantasy points than Scheffler did. It was just kind of one of those tournaments where there wasn't a whole lot of birdies. I know Griffin had that eagle late. And my lineup in general was not that impressive. Like it wasn't anything that I would have looked at, after the tournament. Even after seeing the tournament in the scores, I would not have thought that would have held up in a single entry tournament to be a top 2% lineup. But it did. So, I'm ecstatic. I had some Ricky Fowler. That was big for me. He was at like 3% ownership last week. So kind of took a shot on him. And usually, just to give you all like an idea of how I play, it's basically what I do is I build like 18 lineups or 20 lineups, put them in that $10 18 max tournament. And then I usually take all those 18 lineups and like put them in various like single or 3-entry max kind of tournaments. So that's usually my strategy for like my weekly play in DFS golf. So when I talk about it, that's kind of the context. I don't fire too much in the mega GPPs right now. They're just so hard to win. So that's kind of the strategy that, I've been doing this season, and it's been working out pretty well for me. I've had probably my best year of golf that I can remember.
Yeah, and I think part of the reason why that lineup may not have looked like a winner, but still ended up being a winner was and Noto and I have talked about this quite a bit in these elevated events where they do this mini cut It seems like there's always some weird stuff going on. And you had, even though I think it was only like 14 golfers that got cut last week, you had Aaron Rai in that mix, who was +9. Daniel Berger was +9. I know he was pretty popular last week. JT Poston, Brian Harmon, Lucas Glover. I mean, a couple other bigger names that were like double digits under par, or over par rather. So even though you think about it and it's a week where, okay, only 15 or 20 guys are going to get cut, I'm going to get a lot of 6-6 lineups through. It always inevitably seems like that percentage is much lower than you would have thought. So if you avoided those landmines and got everybody through, and didn't have anybody that shot +10 or +11 on the weekend, probably ended up being a pretty good week for you. But I mean, going forward, like, what is Scheffler doing to the DFS golf landscape? This was something we've kind of evolved this discussion over the last couple of months, and now that he's winning again, I mean, winning basically every event he's teed up in May. And he's going to be, I mean, what's the price cap on this guy going forward? And what's it going to look like for a U.S. Open with Scheffler dominating every tournament? It's just so strange seeing a guy that's basically acting like prime Tiger, and we didn't have DFS back then.
Yeah, it was kind of weird not, starting to build lineups this week with not a 13K guy that we had to worry about jamming into our lineups. I mean, I think you still have to play him and just find other places to get unique. That was kind of what I did last week, right? Like, nobody was playing Ricky Fowler. He finished up with a solid, top 10 for us. So I think you can always get unique other places. We talk about it in even with football, same thing. When there's heavy chalk, if it's good chalk, you just eat it. And at this point in time in a game where there's always variance, there's not with Scotty Scheffler. Like, we saw Rory go into, the PGA Championship, looked like a pretty sure thing, right? This is, of course, he dominated coming off the Masters win, like seemed for sure he was going to be in contention and never was. And I just don't feel like we have that with Scotty right now, since he's, figured out his putter. So even when he's not on, he's that much better than everybody else. So at this point, I mean, I don't think they can price him too much higher than they already did. But the U.S. Open field is interesting because, you've got a lot of kind of no-name guys who made it in via the qualifier, and we know that the course is going to play incredibly difficult. I mean, we'll worry about that more next week, but I think it's an interesting, component, because he's chalky, but he's not, very rarely is he like 50% chalk, right? Like, I think he might have been a few weeks ago in that one tournament where what was it the Texas?
It was him and nobody else.
Yeah, basically. That one he hit an absurd number, but when you bring everybody in the field, I still think there's always going to be people who will just build their lineups without him. And I mean, the guy who won the single entry contest last week, he didn't have Scotty Scheffler in that lineup, and he won by like 50 points. It was incredible.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, there's different ways, especially as the price gets higher, that it's possible to be optimal without him. But yeah, second, fourth, eighth, first, fourth, and first since the end of March. So pretty solid.
Did you have Brandt Snedeker last week? I'm sorry.
No. Or any of the recent years, we could probably say. Probably the last time we hosted a show together is probably the last time he's hit a roster. Which that just goes to the variance of the sport as well. I mean, you just you never know. 7 under on Sunday when the winning score was 10 under for the week. So pretty incredible. 31 strokes or 31 places up the leaderboard on Sunday for him to sneak inside the top 10. So you mentioned the U.S. Open qualifiers, which I think is an important thing to talk about before we start digging in the golfers this week. There were 36-hole U.S. Open qualifiers on Monday. So for those of you that might not be familiar with how U.S. Open qualifying works, there are a lot of spots reserved for various qualifying sites throughout the United States, and you have to go through multi-levels of qualifying in order to make it to the final stage. And those final U.S. Open qualifiers were held yesterday, which was June 2nd. There are quite a few golfers in the field this week that did qualify for the U.S. Open on Monday and played 36 holes and are still committed to the field in Canada this week. Back of my mind says, maybe these guys, you got to be worried about a few of them. Eric Van Rooyen would probably be the biggest name that's in the field that qualified. I know Justin Lower qualified as well. Cameron Young qualified in a playoff. There's a handful of other names maybe towards the bottom of the pricing scale, but theoretically, I mean, we don't have to get into names just yet, but would you be worried about somebody who qualified for the U.S. Open on Monday, maybe doesn't have as much to play for this week now, or is that just thinking too deep?
I think it's thinking too deep. I mean, especially if these guys are lower tier players, like it's hard to get starts right now with the way that they've made these elevated events. And when you get an opportunity to get a paycheck, like you're going to come in and give it your all. Like, because even if they made the US Open, the likelihood they're even going to make the cut in the US Open isn't great. Right. So this is a soft field. It's a chance to get a nice paycheck. And if anything, I mean, you can say that these guys, they're playing good golf, right? They just played 36 holes just a couple of days ago. Now, yeah, fatigue could certainly become an issue. Totally understand that. But I'm not really buying into this mentality of these guys aren't going to be focused. I mean, maybe if they start slow on the first round and then, start bogey in round two, they just, kind of pack it in. But for the most part, I think when the week starts, these guys are going to be as focused as they normally are. And, it could fall off if they're not in contention come the weekend. But to get started, I'm not really that concerned, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and if they're way out of it and they're not in contention, that lineup probably isn't your GPP winner anyway.
Right.
But Van Rooyen was the guy that stood out to me because he played in kind of the Columbus qualifier that kind of attracts the bigger names because it awards 6 spots, and there's usually like 80 or 90 golfers. I didn't see a total, and I can't add this up on the fly, but he won that qualifier by 6 over the second place guy.
13 under.
Pretty impressive. 13 under for 2 rounds. So there's your argument of playing pretty good golf. He had a really solid 2 rounds there.
Yeah, that was my note on him is, if you believe in the hot golfer, guy came out and shot 13 under 6 strokes, and 6 strokes is a ton. I was looking a lot on these qualifiers and, there's only anywhere from 2 to 5 spots. And most of them came down to like a stroke or two between the people who qualified. So for him to like win by 6 is pretty absurd.
Yeah, at least he didn't have to sweat it at the end, just avoid the trouble, and he's in the U.S. Open. So, all right. Any other comments, thoughts from last week? General housekeeping before we turn the page here.
Not really. Let's get into it.
All right, let's do it. We'll see if Dan's research getting back in the content game pays off for him this week. And or at least pays off for some of you that are watching and listening. We hope you all have the best of luck this week with the RBC Canadian Open as well. And again, U.S. Open next week, and that's probably what everyone's looking forward to. But there's still some pretty nice prize pools out there this week too. So everyone's dealing with the same player pool. We'll see if we can uncover some gems here. Pretty weak field with a major coming up next week, and everyone has a chance since Scheffler's not playing. Though we do have Rory in the mix this week. Was kind of surprised to see him in the field, but he becomes kind of our de facto top tier by himself. He's priced at 11.9 over on DraftKings. I believe he's 13K over on FanDuel. Does have really strong history at this event, but we have a brand new course in play. TPC Toronto hosting. They tend to rotate this tournament around to different venues. So don't look at history at this event as a gospel in terms of course related items, because it is a new host this year and a par 70 that looks like it's going to play relatively long. They've hosted some like PGA Tour Canada events here, some PGA Tour America events. So not the same level of golf, but the winning scores have kind of been in the single digits under par for those. Obviously, these PGA Tour guys are probably going to tear it up a little bit more than that. But I don't know. I think this is going to play as a pretty difficult course, though I've certainly been wrong on that before. What do you think?
Yeah, it's. I think I saw the 6th longest course on tour this year, at least on their regular stop. So it's definitely going to play a little bit longer. Only 2 par 5s. They've got a drivable par 4. It's from what I've been reading about it, the greens are easy, right? Like there's no defense on the greens here on this course. It's going to come with the bunkers near the fairway, and just, shot making needed with longer irons, scoring on the par fives. I've heard predictions of like 20 under is maybe what we could see. I don't know that it's going to go that far, but I would say, 15, 17 is probably pretty reasonable. So I think we'll see some pretty good scores here, because I just don't think the greens are going to be that tough.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. We do have the full field in play this week, so we will have the normal cut to 65 and ties. And Rory probably deserves the discussion by himself on how to handle him. Again, not quite to Scheffler level, but he's had a pretty good season, has won this event twice before, again, on different courses. He's 11-9, which is more manageable salary-wise than where Scheffler's been. And we all know that the win equity does matter. So Rory at 11-9, getting him or not getting him?
Yeah, I think I'm going to get him. I think he's going to come into this tournament. People will say, oh, he cares more about the U.S. Open, and that's very accurate. But I don't think you want to go into the U.S. Open, with a lousy finish the week before. And historically in this tournament, he's been great. I mean, he leads the field in stroke gains in Canada over the last 3 years. Again, I think it's a noisy stat because these are a little bit different courses, but we've seen European players always kind of play well in this Canadian Open. So the one thing you run into, though, I think with Rory, the slight problem is it's hard to get him and other, top-notch players together, because I think the 6K this week range is absolutely dreadful. I think it's the worst we've seen all year long. There's, I think, maybe one player that I'm comfortable playing. So we're going to have to talk a lot about everybody else, because when we get to the 6Ks cards, I don't really have much. Like one guy that I want to talk about.
It tends to happen. It's just the way it goes sometimes.
But you're like an average salary of 7,600 for every other spot without Rory. If you're playing Rory, so therefore you're going to be living in that kind of low 7, mid 7s, and there's definitely some plays there that I'm going to be getting into, but I don't really see a scenario where you can play Rory and Connors, or Rory and even Lowry and feel particularly good about it, because I just don't have any trust in these 6K guys. So I'll be playing Rory for sure, but I'm not going to be stars and scrubbing it up with him. He's going to be with a bunch of guys in the middle tier who I think can get, top 5, top 10s and be competitive, rather than, trying to have the top 2 guys, put him and Connors together and just roll the dice, because I think the bottom of this field is just awful.
Yeah, and if you put Rory and Connors in there, then you're left with 7,000 on average for your last 4 spots. So you're trying to find 4 guys in that 6.8K to 7.2K range, which is not an easy challenge unless you just want to roll the dice. So I do agree that he is difficult to fit with the other top options. We'll see what impact that has on ownership. Right now, I think our early runs have him at about 38% ownership, which it'll be interesting to see what most of the builds look like with him. I do think it is pretty tough to get 2 of the guys in there together, but do think that he's clearly the number 1 option. So I'll probably be overweight on the field as well. And I don't think the opportunity cost is super high. I don't like the 9Ks a ton. So, that leads to getting a little bit more Rory. But the other top end guys, if we go down the list just a little bit further, we've got Ludwig at 10.5. Kind of surprises me that he's still getting priced at these levels every week. Haven't really seen a ton of ceiling from him outside of a decent showing at the Masters. Then we got Connors. Of course, the Canadians in their home open are all in the field this week. Shane Lowry's getting some buzz in the early projected ownership. We've got Bobby Mack. Taylor Pendrith takes us down to kind of the middle of the 9K range. I mean, I'd presume you're planning on being underweight here if you're getting a good bit of Rory, but maybe in a few non-Rory lineups, where are you looking to start?
Yeah, I'll probably be on par with ownership on Rory. I don't know that I'll be over. Be very surprised if I end up under. Oberg and Connors, I mean, it's really hard to press Ludwig right now. I mean, the last 12 rounds, he ranks 83rd in strokes gained in this field. And again, somewhat noisy in there because not all these guys played in the same tournaments, but 83rd is not good at all. And that included a 66 that kind of saved him last week on Sunday, where otherwise he probably would have finished like in the bottom 10 of that tournament. That was one of the best rounds of the week. Now maybe that means he figured something out and can turn it around, and 18% ownership actually feels pretty reasonable here with this field, because again, like, this is not a good field. If I'm choosing between him and Connors, though, I think I'm giving the edge to Connors. He's 400 less, and he's played well in Canada. Obviously, that's where he's from. And if you look at his last 12 rounds, he's been, really solid strokes gained in every department except around the green, where he has just been awful. 109th strokes gained around the green in his last 12 rounds. And he's played the toughest tournaments in those 12 rounds: Memorial, PGA, Truist. So I think there's going to be a little bit less pressure on the Canadians this year than we saw last year, with Taylor kind of getting it done and being the first Canadian in seemingly forever to win this tournament. That I think Connors is live for a W here, and I'd give him the edge over Oberg. If I play Oberg, maybe in my 20 lineups, it'll be 1, maybe 2. But, I've only made about 5 or 6, and he didn't make the cut so far. So Connors for me over Oberg.
I agree with that take. Oberg gets the X probably until we start to see either the price come down or the performance get a little bit more consistent. And then I like Lowry right underneath them as well. If you sort by any sort of filter, whether you don't want to go 12 rounds, 24 rounds, 36 rounds, Lowry actually leads this field in strokes gained approach. He's not the longest off the tee by any means, but he's very creative. We know he likes to play on the link style courses, and so I think on a new course, if you're looking for somebody who's going to be a sort of a quick study, Lowry I think is my favorite in kind of this mid 9K to upper 10K range. Connors would probably be next on the list, and then I probably won't have a whole lot of exposure to many of the other golfers above 9K. I mean, I think some of them are rosterable, sure. But if I'm overweight Rory and even on Connors and definitely overweight Lowry, obviously you can't play everybody. I tend to run a narrower player pool than most. So those are definitely my favorites. Your thoughts on maybe Lowry and some of the other guys in the 9s?
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't love the 9s. I agree on Lowry, like, tee to green approach, ball striking. He's been 6th or better over his last 12 rounds, and that includes 2 rounds where I actually missed the cut in the PGA. His problem is he hasn't been able to putt. And I opened up this show saying I think the greens are going to be easy, not going to be a problem. Well, maybe for a guy who doesn't putt the ball very well, that's what he needs, because he's played very tough greens the last 3-4 tournaments. So I think Lowry 100% in play, gonna have a lot of exposure to him. The one guy I really think is getting overlooked in this range is going to be Taylor Pendrith a little bit. If you look at him, 8th tee to green, 11th off the tee, 11th ball striking in his last 12 rounds, and the problem is he couldn't putt. He ranked 108th in the last 12 rounds in this field. So again, with these easy greens, Pendrith is a guy who said that he's played this course a number of times, lives in the area. I think that going back to that Canadian narrative with a little less pressure on these guys to close the deal, I think Pendrith is a really good play, because it's a long course too, and he plays the longer courses pretty well historically. So like Pendrith, not really looking too much on Bobby Mack. His ball striking's okay. Around the green has been fairly terrible. But coming back-to-back week or back-to-back seasons, getting a win, I'm going to probably pass on him. Sam Burns is interesting because he's putting absolutely out of his mind, but he's lost strokes, tee to green, off the tee approach, and ball striking. That kind of makes me think it's somewhat smoke and mirrors here, in a course which we might have easier putting, easier, slower greens for everybody to putt on here. So I'm not going to be playing Burns. The only other guys in the 9K I've got notes on: Harry Hall. Feels expensive, but this kind of feels like one of those DK nose salaries cards. And I think you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
There's these guys who you're like, where did this salary come from? Like, why is he more expensive than, Max Homa or some of these other guys? And I mean, I know the answer to that, but it's just a name that doesn't feel like he should be priced where he's at. And again, he's been putting very well, but in terms of, recent performance, he's one of the leaders in strokes gained over the last 12 rounds. I think ownership might be a little bit lower than we're projecting, so I'll be playing some Harry Hall.
Yeah, he's the other guy I wanted to highlight in this range as well. Of course, I've played him quite a bit, even dating back to the fall swing. Hasn't let me down too much. So when you've tended to get a guy right, more times than not, he stays on the good side. So Harry Hall falls in that bucket, and just pretty good all-around numbers as well. While it's the putter that stood out, he's pretty much been above average everywhere. And like you said, the salary seeming high is a little bit of it takes you back at first, but it's going to be a lot of guys as we get down into this next range, just because of the field strength dropping off pretty quickly. So I'm on board with Team Harry Hall as well at 9.2K. And I know not necessarily a take that I have specifically, but I know from looking at some of our content that was in progress this week when I was filling out our expert survey for our premium content, that there are a couple of sharp minds here on the RG team that do like Luke Clanton this week as well. He's been pretty good with the tee to green game lately. So I don't have a strong take on Clanton, but potential future star. So
hey, I didn't love that he was +2 in the U.S. Open qualifying. I mean, not that we can read too much into that, but he was not overly competitive in that qualifier on Monday. Feels a little too expensive. But again, he's a bomber on a long course. I don't hate it, but I think the ownership's, you're not going to get a value on him.
Yeah, for sure. It tends to be a name that gets thrown around a lot, but felt like throwing it out there that there's at least some sharp people that do like him this week. And then as we get into the 8Ks, you can start to build your all-team Canada this week if you want. That option is certainly open. We've got Mackenzie Hughes and the aforementioned Nick Taylor leading off the 8K range. Further down in the 8K range, we've got another Chris Gotterup, a guy that Dan and I have been a fan of since he first came on the PGA Tour. Has been playing better, and he did qualify for the U.S. Open as well the other day. So shout out to Chris Gotterup for he's rating out pretty well in the mixed model that I created this week too. But the field really starts to dip in strength as we get down here. Thorbjorn Olesen, Wyndham Clark, Alex Noren, Kurt Kitayama, some of the other names that you'll find in this 8K range. Feels like a bit of a dead zone for me. I mean, if you're starting with Rory or you're starting with maybe two guys in the 9 or 10K range, a lot of people are going to be skipping down into the 7s to get those other options. I think you're going to get a lot of lower-owned golfers in here, but there's not a whole lot of standout names. Anybody you took note of in here?
Yeah, not anything I love, or not really too much I absolutely despise here. I think you can sprinkle a couple of these guys in. Nick Taylor should be fine. Struggle a little bit off the tee, but I think he's a fine play. He's not a core play. Thorbjorn Olesen is getting a little bit of talk on social media. 267s in his U.S. Open queue to get a spot. And he's been pretty consistent gaining strokes in like every single category, where if you look, there's certain guys who are really good at three things and then terrible in another. We've already talked about a few. He's got a pretty outstanding game right now all the way through. So I think he's going to make a cut. Maybe he can get into the top 10. I think he's playable. Gotterup is interesting because you mentioned he did win. He did qualify, but that was actually the New Jersey qualifier. So he played on that on Monday and then flew to Canada. And, he's playing really well, very well. Strength ranked second off the tee, tee to green, fourth around the green, a 19th ball striking. He's worth a sprinkle for sure, but he's also a guy who I think could definitely miss a cut. So I would not play him in any sort of cash game, but he's also kind of like Harry Hall, and that $8,300 price tag for Gotterup is going to scare a ton of people away. This guy is almost always in like the mid 6Ks. So kind of like surprised at that salary. What do you think of Max Homa carrying his bag for 36 holes on Monday?
I think he's probably a little more tired than some of the other guys who played 36 holes on Monday. But rumors that he's split up with his caddy, and it really weird because if you go back to last summer is where it kind of really all started to fall apart for him, and he'd actually been playing a little better lately. I mean, nothing fantastic by any means, but had at least been making cuts. So I don't know. He's been a real wild card for a while. I mean, I certainly am not hopping on that train right now, but it'll be interesting to see if he can get the ship righted at some point.
Yeah, it just feels like at some point in time he's gonna have like the wheels are gonna fall off. Like he's made cuts like in 5 straight tournaments, but there's always like, oh, there's a round or two where he's gonna shoot 77 and not be in contention. So until he kind of fixes that, I don't think we can play him very much. I think I might have him on, one or two of my teams just from the name factor and the soft field, but I don't feel any confidence in him whatsoever. The one guy that I do think is somewhat interesting, and he's very sporadic. He's kind of like Goddard up. He could maybe top 10 or could easily miss the cut. And that's Matt Wallace. Played very well in the U.S. Open Q, 67 and 66. And over his last 12 rounds, 6 in strokes gained total. And that included a WD round at the Byron Nelson where, he gave up a ton of strokes. I think he gained a lot around the green looking at some of the numbers. So maybe a few chip ins and could be a little bit noisy there for him. But I think he's going to be under 10%. And, Matt Wallace is somebody that I've actually had some success with in the past. So I think he's playable here. We know that Euros play pretty well here. So if I'm going to take one of the twins, it's going to be Rasmus in terms of the Højgaard clan. Drives the ball well, pretty good course fit. So I don't mind him. And then Eric Cole, if you're playing a cash game, I think you can play him. He's going to make the cut. He's going to give you 4 rounds on a course that might be like 16 under. I just know that you're limiting your upside because I don't know that a top 5 is probably in play.
Yeah, good for that T30 if you want that in a safe option in the middle range. It's probably, I would agree, more of a cash game play. And then you've got, as we start to dig into the upper sevens, I think is where you start to get these risk reward GPP guys. The bombers.
I got one. I got a guy. You ready
got
for
a
him?
guy.
I got a guy. I got a 1%er for you.
Oh no.
Oh yeah. This Johnny Kiefer at 1%.
Yes. He's played the course.
Sign me up for this guy. He qualified for the U.S. Open, not on Monday, but like 2 or 3 weeks ago when they had one in Dallas. And it was with guys like Sergio and Eugenio Chikara, Toasty, Matty Schmid. And dude won that qualifier, or maybe finished second, but he's going to the U.S. Open. So that was interesting. Then I started digging in a little bit on him. And this year on Korn Ferry, he's got a win, 2 seconds, a 4th, a 6th, and a 12th. So then I was like, okay, this guy seems pretty good. What did he do last year? Well, he didn't play Korn Ferry. He played the PGA Tour of Americas, which is like the step below that. But listen to what he did in 2024 in that tour. He had a 3rd, a 4th, a 1st, a 2nd, a 2nd, a 19th, a 6th, a 2nd, a 2nd, and a 5th. I don't care what tour you're playing. If you have that many top 5 finishes, that's incredible. This kid has game, and you know what? The tour's filled with good players. Korn Ferry Tours is such a tough tour. So many good scores there. And this guy's, I don't want to say dominating, but he's arguably the best player on the Korn Ferry Tour. I don't know if he'll come in at 1%. That's what we got him. But I'm going to be way over the field on Johnny Kiefer here.
And I believe one of those PGA Tour of America top finishes was on this course.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that.
I had read that this morning on one of the PGA Tour articles. So I don't know which one it was. It wasn't the one that he won, but he does have experience from that PGA Tour of America because they play an event here every year. So I like that call at 7,800. Nobody knows the name. It's easy to skip over. Might end up being higher than 1% in your sharper contests, but definitely not going to be the household name. The household names, and maybe if you want to play the guys that can really get it out there off the tee, if they can keep it straight, you've got Davis Riley, Jake Knapp, Kevin Yu, all kind of in that mold at the same type of price range. And you can play 2 of these guys in your Rory lineups if you want. Riley having a nice bounce back year himself, did miss the cut in his last start, but you get ceiling potential with some of these guys. With you, it's whether or not he can just keep it straight enough. I mean, you've got Gary Woodland, Ryan Fox, so lots of bombers in this upper 7K range. I do like the Kiefer call. I put Riley in my article this week. I put Kevin Yu in my article this week. So this upper 7K range, definitely where I think you're starting to get your value options to fit in those top tier golfers, because like Dan mentioned, I don't think Dan's got the coveted 6K crapper for you this week. So unless you've got one hiding that you haven't made me aware of.
No, I literally no. I mean, I love trying to find a guy down there, and I couldn't. I've had a good week, and like Gary Woodland was in 6K when in that, I think it was that Children's Hospital tournament. Man, I won some money that week. Won about 20K. So I'm going to go back to little Woodland here. Always like playing him a little bit, but I couldn't find much in the 6K range. But there's a lot of guys here. You mentioned a bunch. I want to throw a few more in. We love Ryan Fox, right? Like we always love Ryan Fox. 4% pwn, playing great, bombs it. No reason not to go there. And I know this one sounds a little sickening, but I liked what I saw on Monday. And Cam Young, he was on my team last week that finished second in that single entry tournament, and he's trending up. He played really well on the last couple of rounds of that Memorial tournament. He's a bomber, and we know he's always had the talent, just never really been able to put it together, but played really well in the queue. So I think Cam Young is certainly a guy we can look at. And then Hitsatsune, 12th in strokes gained over his last 12 rounds in this field. So that's a pretty, solid, consistent ball striker there. So I think Hitsatsune is somebody we can consider, as well as Van Rooyen, who we talked about a little bit earlier.
So if you're not familiar with the running gag on the show between Noto and I, we have completely bombed the Cam Young takes. I was on him one week just randomly. I can't remember what the circumstance. This goes back a couple months, maybe like March or April. But I was on Cam Young, and he shot an 82 in the first round. And then a couple weeks later, Noto decided to go down the same path, and he went 76-75. So he was like 8 or 10 over both weeks that we took him. So nice that you're willing to take the dive on Cam Young this week. And if he does terribly, we just know it's the show when he comes up on the show. Yeah.
Right. So. Exactly. I'll throw a couple more names in the bottom 7Ks that I think are playable here. Ben-An, Hubbard. I like these guys a good bit. I think Ben-An, he hasn't been playing great, but man, it seems the price seems really fair for him here. And Hubbard, on the flip side, has been playing great. Hasn't been playing in all the marquee tournaments, but another guy who, did qualify on Monday. And, he kind of fits that mold of somebody who, needs the starts, needs the paychecks, and, his game seems in good form. So I think we can play Homeless Hubs there. Probably my favorite in this range. And then both of the Svensons are somewhat interesting. Adam has made the cut in 5 of the last 6 tournaments. If he putts, I think he could actually contend for a top 10, top 20. That's a big if, but again, these greens aren't that tough. At least I'm projecting that. Maybe he can put it together in this tournament. He's Canadian. That doesn't hurt in my eyes. So I don't mind Adam Svensson, and I think Jesper might even be the better one. 3rd off the tee over his last 12 rounds, 31st tee to green. Just another guy who can't putt. Now, this is kind of a POA mix, and he has putted well on POA in his 11 rounds. He ranks 18th in the field in strokes gained putting on POA. So enough for me to be playing some Jesper Svensson here this week. So
yeah, you're not going to find anybody down in this price range that's got like the glowing stats in every category. Yeah. I mean, at this point, you're in a weak field, and we're down to 7K, so everybody's got a weakness. So I mean, if you're looking for the glowing endorsements for everybody, you got to go back up the board a little bit, but can at least make a case for those guys. And we've seen upside from the Svenssons, especially Adam, maybe a little bit longer term, but in previous PGA Tour events. So I don't mind chasing guys that have a little bit of upside down here. You could probably make a case for Toasty too if you wanted to, if you're on team no putt. but does everything else pretty good. He's actually been pretty decent scrambling of late. If you're putting a little stock into the scrambling metrics, if you're not too concerned about distance, you do have Andrew Putnam, who's not long off the tee at all, but does everything else pretty well, right at 7K. And so again, that's 5 or 6 names that if you're starting with Rory and you're down to that lower 7K range for quite a few options, that's probably where you're going to want to get them from, because it does seem like there's a pretty big drop off down into the 7Ks, which, intentional or not, kind of feels like that's always the dividing line. I think Dan mentioned one name he feels comfortable with. I probably only have one name that I feel fairly comfortable with as well. I will let you throw your name out there first, and we'll see who it is.
He was a late add to Hayden Springer, with 6,500, I think. Can hit the ball far, has had a couple of great weeks, or decent enough weeks. I think I'll have him in one, maybe 2 of my 20 lineups, but I'm not going crazy with that one. But he legitimately is like the lone guy that I'm even considering. I had Damon on a team a couple of weeks ago, and he made that hole in one. Thank goodness, because it helped that team, cash, even though he didn't make the cut, got me all those hole in one points. But I still can't trust him or pretty much anyone else down there. So Springer is my lone 6K crapper, and I feel terrible about it. So living in the 7s.
It's got to be somebody. Damon was the guy that I highlighted, has missed a few cuts in a row. Did have a second in Punta Cana a few weeks back. And, his missed cuts haven't been too far off the number. They've been in some tougher events. If you go slightly longer term on the stats, I filtered by 36 rounds. Damon is 5th in this field on approach, despite the relatively underwhelming, results. So he hasn't been too far off. If you're looking for a guy in here, I don't mind sprinkling him in to some GPP builds, but for sure in single entry, in cash games, I would probably stick to the 7K and above. Anybody else on your radar?
That we haven't talked about. No, I think I got pretty much everybody on my list. I think these are the guys that I'm playing here. And, I think it's going to be an interesting week. It's nice to have a full field with a cut. This past week, I just hate. Do you think the tour is going to change it? I think they are. I think they're going to make it 100-man fields with a cut, with a little bit larger cut next year in these elevated events. That's what I think is going to happen. So I hate.
Yeah, I would like those. We've even talked about, even in these 70-man fields, it just adds a little bit more excitement to the DFS experience when there's some type of cut giving you something to sweat over the first couple of days. I know that's maybe not a concern for other people if they're just playing showdown or if they're betting and whatnot, but I don't know, it just feels like there's not as much excitement those first couple of days than if there's a cut. And it's not like it doesn't matter, because even guys that barely make the cut, we've seen them charge up the leaderboard on the weekends and contend for tournaments. So it is just so much better when there's more of an element of importance to those first couple of rounds and trying to get off to a good start, in my opinion. But
yeah, and the main reason for it was, the sponsors wanted the stars to play all 4 days. Guess what? Like, most of the good players are still going to make this.
Most of them are good enough to be playing anyway. And if they, is anybody really going to be tuning in to watch Xander Schauffele if he's 12 over par? No, you're only watching him if he's in the mix anyways.
Yeah, and I think that might even be more for like people attending the tournament to be like, I want to, those people probably will watch, Xander if he's 12 over, just to say they watch Xander. But at the end of the day, most of those guys are making cuts anyway and going to be around for the weekends, even if it's a 100-man field with a 40-man cut or whatever they decide to do. But I just hope they change that, because I just really don't like those those no cut events.
Especially all the ones that are 60 golfers and no cut, and it's just
so bad.
Feels like they're relative drag through the first couple of days. And now if you throw in, if Scheffler's going to dominate those too, then it really kind of takes the excitement out of it. So I'm with you on that. I know Noto is as well, so he'll be nodding his approval from the sidelines. So all right, with that, we'll probably go ahead and put a bow on it for this week. I do want to thank Dan for stepping up and filling in for Noto while he's away. Thanks to TJ, as always, for producing behind the scenes as well. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on that YouTube video. Always appreciate that support. You can subscribe to our RotoGrinders channel, get notifications whenever we go live. We do this every Tuesday night around the same time. So we'll be back here next week to break down the U.S. Open. So it should be a lot of fun. Really challenging course next week. So I'll have another special guest alongside me next week. But until then, thanks to Dan, thanks to TJ. I'm Justin. We hope you all have a great week and good luck with all your contests. We'll see you later, everybody.